Welcome back. You're listening to the Dynasty Market Watch, where yesterday's price is not today's price, presented by the Bulletproof Family of Podcasts. I'm Todd Halverson. I'm joined today by Matt Davis. No Brian O'Leary today, so no Celtics talk. Today, Matt and I are talking rookie ADP, who we think will be risers and fallers post-NFL draft, and then who are our guys in rookie drafts based on this current ADP. We'll kind of run through first round, second round, third round, and kind of give guys that we are really targeting within those rounds. Matt, play that Fat Joe.
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
And before we get started, just help us out with the rating and review of the podcast on Apple or Spotify or on YouTube as well. And speaking of YouTube, Matt, we're on YouTube. I'm going to be sharing a view of the ADP found from dynastydatalab.com. So if you want to go to that site, you can see startup ADP. They also kind of have the rookies within there, and that's where I've pulled. So I'm going to share that view, and we will see if I can figure out the right view. All right. So if you're on YouTube, you can see, hopefully, the Dynasty rookie ADP as of April 18th. This runs April 1st through April 18th. So Matt, if you can see that, maybe just kind of give us a rundown of like what that first round ADP. I think we all kind of know what the top 6 or 7 look like, but just to kind of reiterate for the listener, and then let's run through. Maybe let's start with who our risers and fallers are going to be, maybe just in this first round.
Yeah, so the first round we have Caleb 1, Marvin Harrison 2, Malik Neighbors 3, Jaden Daniels 4, Drake May 5, Brock Bowers 6, Rome Odunze 7, JJ McCarthy 8. I think that's pretty common or across the board. 9, we have Brian Thomas Jr., 10, Xavier Worthy, 11, Adonai Mitchell, and then 12, Michael Penix Jr. The one that stood out to me right away, I'll just say, is someone who's going to – I don't see anyone really rising in this first round. I don't think Michael Penix belongs in the back end of the first round. I think we see him fall out.
Okay, so he's your follower. I've got one riser, and actually I don't have a name. I'm taking a bailout here. But the riser that I've got is whoever the Bills draft at wide receiver. So whether that's Adonai Mitchell or Brian Thomas Jr., I'm going to go with one of those two because they have some smaller guys. They've got Curtis Samuel. They've got Khalil Shakir. So they've got kind of like that smaller build. They're obviously not as fast as like an Xavier Worthy or maybe like Ladd McConkey, but I think they're looking for that bigger body guy. And Brian Thomas Jr. or Adonai Mitchell, either of them go to the Bills, I think that they shoot up. And it actually ties in with who my follower is. I'll pause on who my follower is for a second, let you have any response on who I think will probably rise. And I'll go ahead and say I think they rise up to the 108.
I think even if it's a bad prospect that we don't really like that much, I think it's 109, maybe 108. If Mitchell or Brian Thomas Jr. get drafted to the Bills round 1, yeah, I think you're going to see people taking them even at 108, maybe. Like I'm looking at a guy that a lot of people don't like very much, like Keon Coleman. Like if Keon Coleman goes late round 1 to the Bills, yeah, I think you're going to see him at 109. I think that's just default. And I also think there's a chance that the Bills don't take a receiver in round 1, which would disappoint a lot of people. But yeah.
And then if they take one round,
go ahead.
And then if they take one in round 2, it could push up a guy like let's say they went like Xavier Legette or like a Ricky Pearsall, that could push that guy up into the really early second or even the late first in some drafts. I don't think it's like early second ADP. Some drafts you might see him go all the way up into the late first.
So before you give your follower, I will say there's one other sneaking suspicion I have, and this could just sound totally stupid a week from now. I really think there's just a chance, maybe 10-20% chance, that either JJ McCarthy or Jaden Daniels falls out of the top 10 in real life. I don't know what that would do to their, especially Jaden Daniels. I don't know what that would do to their rookie impact if they went like mid to late first round. But like we see this all the time. Will Levis famously was like mocked in the top 5 in a lot of drafts last year, this time of year, the week before the draft. I can just see one of those guys falling, and maybe I'm wrong, but like that wouldn't shock me at all.
Even back a few years ago, you had Mac Jones and Justin Fields being mocked really high. They fell a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, a couple years ago, Malik Willis, that's a little bit of a different situation here. But I do think that JJ McCarthy, he could be the one where, like, if a team isn't able to get a trade up solidified, instead of going at 4, maybe he goes to 6. For whatever reason, the Giants pass on quarterback. Maybe he were to fall and maybe somebody trades up in the 7, 8, 9 range, something like that. But you teed me up because my faller is JJ McCarthy in rookie draft. NFL draft. I think he could still go 4, 5, 6. I'm not anticipating a fall there like you are, but I think that there's a chance that he could fall in rookie drafts. Reason being, people love taking receivers in their rookie drafts because of the potential for immediate impact. And is there a chance that somebody is sitting there at the 107, 108, 109, and they're like, I've already got a quarterback. I don't want to draft a quarterback. I'm set at quarterback. Let me have Brian Thomas Jr., who just went to the Bills. Or let me take Xavier Worthy, who got drafted by the Cowboys. And I think that you start to see a potential for certain drafts him to fall into that 1-9, 1-10, 1-11 range. And I don't think he's going to go much higher than like 107. And so I think that there's a chance that like his ADP, when all said and done, maybe it's in that 108, 109 range, but I think it's almost like a different tier than what people are kind of preparing for now, which is kind of like him right on the edge of the 107. Like he could go 106, 107 in some drafts is what people are thinking. And I'm thinking that that doesn't happen.
What I really want to have happen, just for selfish reasons, kind of, is I want JJ McCarthy to end up in Minnesota. And then I want Drake May to get drafted by the Patriots. And then I've already seen tweets and people talking about Drake May could fall to 107, 108 if he goes to New England. Man, that makes no fucking sense to me. Like the Drake May stuff, this is why I can't wait for the draft to get here, because everybody is overthinking Drake May. And we've talked about it for 2 months now. I know you're a big Drake May guy. Like, he's much closer to 102 than like the 105 where he's currently ranked for me. Like I don't know. I go back and forth between Drake May and Marvin Harrison at 102, but man, May is just a classic guy that I think everybody is overthinking right now, and the upside is phenomenal with him. And I think he's a much better bet to hit that upside than someone like Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, and part of the talk of Drake May falling to like a 107 spot just kind of speaks to how incredible the top 7 of this class is.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's wild how impressive the top 7 of this class is. I'm personally not really a fan after like the 108, 109 of a lot of these guys that are being kind of gassed up, but through the top 7, I'm not even a fan of Rumadunze, but I'm still even putting him in there.
I was going to ask you,
insane.
I wanted to ask you about Odunze. Like, so you're still pretty skeptical of him, like compared to how everyone else is talking about him, like top 12, top 15 dynasty wide receiver already.
Yeah, like I would still have him in like the wide receiver glob, like wide receiver 12 to 24, probably somewhere in the middle of it. Yeah. But I would rather pivot to one of those other options. If I'm sitting at the 107 and I am with the decision of like, do I take him or not? Like, I'm obviously not going to just like pass on him, but like I would be taking him with the plan to trade most likely. I think that there's some downside there that's not really being baked in. I think that comparing him to like Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. is a little bit too rich for me. But I'm not like I don't think he's bad. I think he's just a little bit overvalued.
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah.
So just to kind of, that was the first round. The move up guy for me was the Bills wide receiver. I think that McCarthy could fall in rookie drafts. Anybody else in this first round that kind of gives you the uncertainty of where there might be ADP at right now? I guess Drake May was one of them for you. Yeah, so Drake May, he could take that tumble.
Yeah, and I just don't get it, man. But like, so with Drake May, have you seen the movie Draft Day?
Yeah, oh yeah. Every year for the draft, I watch it either in the morning or the night before.
Yeah. So one of my
It's better every year too.
One of my favorite scenes from that movie is when Kevin Costner is talking about quarterbacks, and he said, we have to figure out what his flaw is, and we have to figure out if it matters. Like, Montana was too small, Elway was too strong, he threw too hard. Did it matter? No, it didn't matter. Like Drake May, I get it. Like some of the accuracy concerns, like in the intermediate depth of the field, and he doesn't check down enough, and like maybe his footwork needs improvement. Like, I don't fucking care. It probably doesn't matter if he gets good coaching and he actually realizes his potential. Like, players improve. They're not going to be a finished product when they come into the league. So
Trevor Lawrence is headed to year 4, and we're still talking about we need Trevor Lawrence to continue to improve. Like, Drake May's 20 years old, guys. Like, we have to expect the guy's going to improve a little bit.
Yeah, and I like you've done a good job tweeting out and sharing some of the big time throw data from PFF, and like that just shows up to me. Like I'm willing to take that bet on him, and I've been assuming, going back to like the end of the season, like around Christmas time, that he was going to be 102 or 103 at the very worst, and like over the last 5-6 weeks, we've gradually heard more and more about people having him 105, 106. And now it seems to be like consensus that Neighbors is above him. I just don't know. Like, to me, there's nothing I'm going to do. There's nothing that's going to happen. There's no landing spot that's going to be bad enough for me to move him out worse than 103, unless he falls in the draft, like outside the top 5, which I just don't see happening. I think that Drake May is going to get drafted by Washington. I know it's popular that people think they're going to take Daniels. I don't believe that. I think at the end of the day, they're going to end up taking Drake May. And then I think you're going to see him solidify in that 103 or 104 spot in rookie drafts. But enough of the first round. Let's get into the second round a little bit. I think that's going to be the most interesting area of the draft, I think, in terms of movement from now until a week from now when the draft hits. So real quick, I'll just recap the second round here. 201, Ladd McConkey. 202, Jonathan Brooks. 203, Troy Franklin. 204, Trey Benson. 205, Bo Nix. 206, Blake Corum. 207, Keon Coleman. 208, Jatavian Sanders. 209, Xavier Legette. 210, Ricky Pearsall. 211, Braylon Allen. 212, my guy, Roman Wilson. So this looks kind of about right to me. Anything stand out to you here? There's one name that stood out to me that I think is going to move down.
So my guy that I think is going to move up in this range is Ricky Pearsall. I think that he's going to be the one that's just kind of like the sexy name that people get excited about. And it's basically just pending a good landing spot. And I think he moves into the early second. He's just like the guy that, like, every class, there's like that one guy that people get excited. Like Jonathan Mingo was that guy last year. It felt like people just he did nothing his whole career, but everybody just all of a sudden loved Jonathan Mingo. Ricky Pearsall is that guy for me. And I think he's going to get some gas. One thing that I like to do is kind of hear from the mainstream Dynasty player and like, well, who do they like? And for some reason, Ricky Pearsall is one that keeps coming up. So I would say he is the guy that I think gets steamed up. Let's say the early second, and barring like a crazy landing spot, like let's say the Chiefs at the end of round 1 or the Bills or something where people just get overly excited, you could see him go in that like 111, 112 range in some drafts. Maybe not ADP wise, but like in some drafts, he gets as high as that.
Yeah. A lot of people are talking about him, so I can't see him being drafted in the first round of the NFL draft, but who knows? Maybe he will, because he is frequently mocked in the second, so it's not like it would be a huge jump. But I do think he's a good bet to move up. He would probably be the guy that I would pick out of these 12 to move up. Like I said, right now they look pretty appropriate, but the one guy that stands out to me that I don't think belongs anywhere in the second round is Jatavian Sanders.
Yeah.
I think he's going to fall, and we'll get through the other rounds later, but Ben Sinnott is 401 in this list. I would rather have Ben Sinnott than Jatavian Sanders. I think he's a better prospect. I think they're going to get drafted around the same spot. But the more I look into Sanders, he's not really special at all as a receiver. He can't block, which doesn't really matter for fantasy, but matters in the real life.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't think he's that good of a prospect. So it wouldn't shock me at all if he fell to like the fourth round in real life and then, completely dropped to like the late third in rookie draft. So I think he's the guy that's going to fall.
Yep.
And
he was my faller. I think the NFL is probably not going to be as high on him as maybe like fantasy players are, because we're seeing the opportunity of maybe the receiving end of things. And the NFL is looking at it more from a holistic view of how they can impact our football team. And so, yeah, I think he probably ends up being a major faller. I'm going to go with another one. Pray for my boy, Troy Franklin. There's nothing wrong with him, but I think that the guys around him are going to get pushed up. And for whatever reason, he's just the one that he's just kind of like floating out there in the middle of nowhere. And then people just kind of go above him and like he gets pushed down. Somebody else goes above him. He gets pushed down. He ran a 4.41 at the combine. Like, he's the type of guy, if he had ran a 4.39, people were more excited. He was like 180-ish pounds or so. If he had been like 190, people would be more excited about it. He's just kind of like barely misses on a few things that just kind of keeps him subdued. And I think he's perfectly fine. Like, he's a guy that we're going to talk about guys that we're interested in at certain points in the draft. He's a guy that I'm going to be interested in. So I think that he's a faller potentially. Like I said, pray for my boy Troy Franklin. There's nothing wrong with him, but I think he's going to move down a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, if Keon Coleman slips in the real life draft, I can see him slipping in rookie drafts because, I think his projected early second round draft capital in real life is kind of buoying his 207 ranking here. A lot of red flags with him analytically. Mm-hmm. Another guy that seems to be on this list by default, kind of like, I feel like people are just kind of hedging in case he gets drafted high, is Bo Nix. Like, again, with Michael Penix, we just don't know. Like, if you said Bo Nix got drafted like 12th overall to Denver, or he went like early third round in real life, like, none of those range of outcomes would surprise me. So I feel like he's just kind of in here as a hedge at 205. He'll probably move down.
Yeah. With Bo Nix, I think he's most likely going to be drafted as a backup. Mm-hmm. And maybe like in like the Will Levis mold of like, hey, we got a starter. We will maybe try to get him an opportunity, but like, he's drafted as a backup initially. Like, let's just split the difference. You said 12 or third. Let's just say second round. He goes up somewhere in the second. He's drafted as a backup. People are just going to be more excited about drafting a running back or a receiver, just like we were talking about earlier about McCarthy. And so I could definitely see Bo Nix falling all the way to that late second range.
Yeah, and with the running backs, like you mentioned, so in the first round, you were talking about the Buffalo wide receiver spot that seems to be a glaring need on the team now. The two running back spots that are going to get steamed up like crazy is the Chargers and Cowboys. If either team takes a running back, even round 4, I think they're going to get steamed up pretty high. But
Chargers
especially
did just sign Dobbins. I mean,
Dobbins and Gus. I love how they're recreating Baltimore over there. Man, I want to believe still in Dobbins. It's just, I don't know what he possibly has left in the tank after all these debilitating injuries. But yeah, either one of those teams takes a running back, and you're looking at like 201.
I have written down 111 or 112 between Brooks or Jonathan Brooks or Trey Benson, whichever one goes to the smash landing spot. They're probably going in the 111, 112 ADP. So like, that means somewhere on average between like 109 and 201 or 202. Like, I think that People get on the clock and then they end up drafting for need because they look at the roster and they're like, I'm kind of deciding between these two guys. Give me the guy that I go for need instead of just straight up drafting for value.
Yeah, don't do that. By the way, people, I know it's easier to say in the abstract than when you're on the clock and you're seeing that running back hole in your lineup, but man, that's how you get in trouble. That's how you take like the Keyshawn Bonds of the world over like
Trey Sermon, Isaiah Spillers, like those guys have gone in that range. They've gotten pushed up as third round running backs because they went to a spot where people viewed them as a potential starter.
Yep, definitely. But yeah, other than that, I think the consensus ADP has done a pretty good job of ranking these guys pretty close to how I see them. Anything else really stand out for you in the second round before we get to the third round?
No, I think you're starting to see after, if you're looking on YouTube, after about the 207, which that tier from the 205 to the 207 was Bo Nix, Blake Corum, and Keon Coleman. After that tier, all the guys that we were really listing, like Jatavian Sanders, Leggett, Pearsall, Braylon Allen, Roman Wilson, Marshawn Lloyd, they are all kind of in a weird spot where they could end up being third rounders. On a smash landing spot, they can maybe move up into the second or just hold their second round value. So a lot of these guys are kind of like a third round. They could go either way. As we go into the third round, though, it's a lot of question marks, let's say. And so you've got Malachi Corley, Marshawn Lloyd 301. Then you got Malachi Corley, Jalen Polk, Bucky Irving, Audric Estime, Demontez Walker, Brendan Rice, Spencer Rattler, and Will Shipley. And then finishing out in the third round, Jalen McMillan, Ray Davis, Jermaine Burton. My riser, and it's only due to what I'm seeing on mock drafts and a recent mock draft from someone, I don't remember who exactly it was, but a marquee person in the know, maybe like Peter Strager or
are you talking about Jalen Polk?
Jalen Polk going 32.
That was Pete Schrager. Yeah, Pete Schrager had him to the Chiefs at the end of round one.
And if he goes early 2 or late 1, obviously he's going to go flying up draft boards. It seems like the way I view like a Peter Strager mock draft is these guys have like intel on two sides. Their intel is, hey, the consensus is that people like this player. People like Jalen Polk. People like Ricky Pearsall. They like the player. Then they're looking at like team needs, and then they're just piecing together their mock from there. Or they're hearing buzz about like, oh, the Chiefs are probably thinking to take a receiver, or like the Bills are going to take a receiver, whatever it is. And that's how they're putting together their mocks. I don't think that they have like any intel whatsoever about who these teams will take. But the fact that he put Polk in the first round, at the end of the first round, tells me that like there are people that think he could go in the first round, which means maybe he goes early second. But if he goes early second, that means he's going to go flying up into our second round of rookie drafts.
Yeah, those were the two guys that I saw in the third round that I think could move up was the two Washington guys, actually, Polk and then his teammate, Jalen McMillan.
Yeah, I think McMillan's better.
Yeah, I mean, there's some interesting stuff with McMillan, how he was kind of pacing with Odunze for their careers, and then he got hurt this past year. And this kind of, again, goes back to why I just don't think Penix is very good, is like, he might have had 3 legit NFL caliber wide receivers, like good ones that he was throwing to. So yeah, Polk and McMillan stand out to me as guys that could rise up here. And yeah, like you said, Polk could rise up a lot. Like if he really did end up going 32 overall to the Chiefs, like you're talking about him at 109 then, 109, 110. I mean, because at that point they told you like, hey, we really love this guy. So exactly. Outside of the top 8, there's just so much fluidity to all these guys and where they could end up going. And then 301 Marshawn Lloyd. We had Tyler on, our friend Tyler, for a rookie breakdown, and Marshawn Lloyd was his RB1.
So
that's one. Yeah, go ahead.
Any of those guys, running backs, they go to a good spot. They could move way up. So let's maybe ignore round 4 and just maybe move into who we like in these rounds. Like based on this ADP, who are we trying to position our rookie picks with? We could also kind of do it as where do you have some picks? Like I have a lot of 102s. What am I going to try to do with my 102s? Where am I going to try to position to get guys that I really like so we can kind of spotlight some players? We might even have a little bit of crossover. We haven't talked about who we're going to take yet, so there might end up being some crossover here. So I'll lead us off and just kind of talk about my 102 strategy, and then we can go from there. So
All right.
I on all my tank teams, obviously you're going for the 101 when you're tanking, but I was not willing to go to the limits that some people were. So I ended up with several 102s, like 30% of my leagues that have the 102. And so I'm sitting there, and my plan basically is Marvin Harrison Jr. is my wide receiver 1, but Malik Neighbors is right on his tail. Probably I would consider them in the same tier based on the kind of the I guess I'd call it a model that I have. They are in the same tier, and in that model, they're both top 4 prospects, top 5 prospects since 2010. So obviously, I love Malik Neighbors. I wish that he was probably more of a value. I wish that he was going back in that 105, 106 range. But my plan will be to try to move back from the 102 with a few of those, and then with a few of them, take Marvin Harrison Jr. So what am I trying to get? I think that's like the golden question for this draft is what can you do? What can you get trading back from the 101 to the 102? What can you get trading back from the 102 and then, further back than that? Matt, I'm going to ask you the question. My thought is just like, can I get a really early second, or can I get like 2 future seconds? If you were holding like the 104 and I asked for 25 and 26 second for the 102, does that make sense?
So I would not make that trade, but I think that is a trade that you can get done in other leagues. I think there's people that like Marvin enough, I think it would just have to be Marvin, because I think if someone is a really big Daniels or Neighbors or May guy, they're going to try and hope that person falls to 4.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd have to be Marvin, but there's enough Marvin fans that would pay that price. But one thing that I've been kind of frustrated by over the past month, and maybe I just need to wait until these rookie drafts happen, is I have not been able to move around in the top 6 or 7 at all. We'll talk about a trade later that I did where I ended up trading 101, a share of Caleb. But I've been I actually do have a decent amount of 101s. Like you said, you had with 102, where I did debase myself enough to get those 101s. And I've been trying to trade back from 101 to like 104. 105 and get like a future first, and I've seen people get more than that on Twitter and other leagues, and I just can't get those trades done. So I don't know if it's a matter of waiting until I'm on the clock or what, but I've seen people get a lot better returns for 101 and 102 than I've been able to get myself. So maybe that's just like bad luck in the few leagues I'm in that spot. But
yeah, I think part of it is just I think it's a timing thing. There's some people that just want to wait it out.
Yeah.
Want to give away the house too soon. So I think part of it's a timing thing. I've got a lot of leagues where people will say, like the group chatter things like, I'm not making a move until the draft or up to the draft or on draft day, things like that. And that's kind of frustrating. But at the same time, I get it. I'm not going to press the envelope. Let's see if we can get something done later. So yeah, I think moving out of the 101 or the 102, if you can get back, I mean, a late first would be nice going from the 101 to the 102. I think you might be hard pressed to do that in a lot of leagues, but late first would be the ideal. Going from the 102 to like the 103, I'd probably be looking at trying to get like an early second. Once you get to like a late second, like what's the point? Like,
right.
So I can add a Braylon Allen share. I mean, who cares? Like, just give me the guy that I somewhat prefer. It's just not worth it. But now, if we're talking early 2, If we're talking, I can get like Jonathan Brooks, or I can get Lad McConkey on the an early second NFL draft pick. Yeah, then that's a little bit of a game changer.
Yeah, so I only have the 102 in one single league, and probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was a guy that had the 107, and I offered him the 102 for 107 and a 25 first. And his team isn't, that great. But I was thinking, Marvin Harrison for Odunze and, a future first.
Mm-hmm.
And the following day, he messaged me back and just said, "Not close, brother." I was like, damn, all right. Like, and that's like a trade I've seen people do. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an Odunze fan, but like that would be a trade that if I'm a rebuilder, you have to consider doing that because you have to figure out a way to avalanche your value and kind of continue to snowball it and make a like to build your roster. And what you just proposed, I mean, you're getting what did you say, the 107 and a 25 first for the
yeah,
102?
with
I mean,
some potential upside. He's like a fringe
yeah,
playoff team, like the 107 suggests. So yeah, and like after he said not close, I was like you said, I'm like, all right, well, I'm not going to trade it for 107 in like a mid second. I was trying to
yeah,
get some upside value wise. So like, all right, I guess I'll just stick there and probably end up taking Marvin. But
yeah.
yeah, the other kind of sweet spot that I'm looking at in the draft that I don't really have any specific player in mind is like that early second, like 201, 202, 203.
Mm-hmm.
I think those spots are going to become pretty enticing once we get all the final landing spot, draft capital, all that figured out. You get the 1 or 2 running backs that get steamed up till that range or even higher. Like you said, you get the maybe Buffalo or Dallas landing spot for a receiver, etc. So I think you're going to find guys like, McConkey or like your boy Franklin or, maybe Mitchell slides a little bit and you get Adonai Mitchell there or Xavier Worthy, etc. So any of those, like in that wide receiver bucket, if you're picking at the end of that tier,
Yeah.
especially if one of these guys gets like a quote unquote gross landing spot that's actually not bad at all, like they go to the Giants or Patriots in the second round, like wheels up, man. If they have no competition, I don't really care if it's a shitty situation.
Yeah, because
So
like if you're thinking about the way that most rookie drafts are going to go, like we've been talking about, you have basically going through the 107 with Rome Odunze, and then like McCarthy probably like 108. Then you think about like, all right, the Bills wide receiver they take, that guy's probably going 109. Now you're talking about like 110 through that 201, 202. They're all like pretty similar from there. Like there's going to be the running back that you mentioned, maybe 2 of them. And so, yeah, that 201, 202, that's a pretty sweet spot. That's the like golden ticket spot for me where I would love to get Xavier Worthy. So Xavier Worthy is like, I would say like my guy of who I really want
yeah,
after the marquee picks going through, call it 108, 109. From there down, Xavier Worthy is the guy that I'm really going after. The model that I was referring to grades him out really strong. And so that's the guy that I really want. And it's just a matter of I want him after ADP though. Like we have him currently ADP 110. I'm not paying up for the guy at the 110. Like that's not a good pick to me. Taking someone at the 110 means you're taking a bunch of guys in the same tier and you're just taking the luxury pick of taking who you really want. And that's not something I'm going to sign up for.
yeah, that's a conundrum I find myself in where like I'm really hoping one of these like you talked about 109 Buffalo Cowboys, etc. I really hope one of these landing spots really juices a guy up because just by coincidence or whatever, I found myself with like 5 or 6 shares of the 109. And it's like, that's probably right now the least desirable spot to pick in. Just because, like you said, you never really want to be drafting at the front of a tier. So I'm kind of hoping one of these guys separates themselves and, jumps into that 109 spot.
Well, you could be the guy that ends up getting McCarthy at the 109. That'd be
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
If a Bills receiver, somebody goes at 108, they juice like Brian Thomas Jr. up. Bam, McCarthy drops like I'm kind of anticipating.
So one thing that I thought would be pretty fun, and I could see it happening, but it's probably a low likelihood. Is so the Cardinals pick 4, and they also have the Texans first round pick, which was number 27. They have no wide receivers on that team. Like Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch are their top 2 wide receivers. So it would be so fun to me if they took Marvin at 4 and then just double tap receiver and took like Worthy at 27. Like, and then all of a sudden you got Kyler with Marvin.
Kyler wheeled up.
Like, I know that's like the, typical fantasy football like lens of it. Like, they're a terrible fucking team and they have a lot of needs, so they're probably not going to do that. But that would be a lot of fucking fun, man. But there's just a lot of teams in that like late first, early second range where wide receiver is going to look really good, either because the team is good or the depth chart is wide open. Either one of those.
Yeah, there's a lot of teams in the very late first that have some strong needs at receiver. So anybody in that, like you mentioned the 201, 202, anybody in that range specifically, we don't have landing spot or anything right now, but like, is there a player in that range? I know you've liked Worthy for a long time. Any player in that range that you really kind of like? Let me just run through the players while you're kind of thinking here. So the current ADP is Xavier Worthy, 110, Adonai Mitchell, 111, 112, Michael Penix Jr., 201, Ladd McConkey, 202, Jonathan Brooks, 203, Troy Franklin, 204, Trey Benson. And then I think there's a pretty significant tier break after that, because then you have Nix, Corum, Coleman. That kind of feels like another significant drop to me.
Yeah, the one running back I find myself kind of getting sold on, and I don't know if it's just because all these running backs have major flaws, so you kind of end up selling yourself on the best one. Is Trey Benson is a guy that really is starting to intrigue me with a couple comps that I heard people make that I kind of buy when you watch his film and look at his numbers. Is Travis Etienne, where like he has some questions about like his vision and how he actually plays the position, but then he could just break off a 70-yard touchdown run.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter that, he missed a hole of the play before. So Benson is a guy that I'm pretty intrigued by. And he's a guy that I'm like, if he goes round 2 or 3, if he goes on day 2 in real life, I'm pretty excited to draft him like in the early second and take that shot.
Yeah, I like that one. I like that one. Yeah. What'll inevitably happen is one or two of these guys will get a really good running back landing spot, and then one of them will get the Zach Charbonnet landing spot where it's like, wait, what? Why did he? So he's going to go be the backup to Ken Walker.
Man, that crushed everybody. I think like people were talking about. Yeah, go ahead.
No, we'll get that weird landing spot, and we're just going to be like, hey, I don't know if I like that now. And so that guy will either be kind of like become a value or he'll get overdrafted. It's just like a weird place to be, but that happens every year. Like we're always like getting this weird running back situation. So it's a hope that it's not your guy that lands there. But at the same time, it could be a value because then Trey Benson's all of a sudden falling to the 210 because he's behind Jonathan Taylor or something.
Yeah, speaking of ETN, man, a dude that I loved pre-draft last year was Tank Bigsby. And like even after that weird landing spot with ETN, I was like, all right, Thunder and Lightning, whatever. Like I get it, what they're trying. I was like, I'm still in on Tank Bigsby at like a mid-second price. And like, I mean, you might as well drop him now. Like I mean, he's rosterable, but you can't even get like a late third for him now. So yeah, I mean, these guys can fall to zero pretty quickly.
Yeah. So we have a player that we're kind of opposite ends of the spectrum on here, and currently Michael Penix Jr. is being being ADP at the 112. I think on betting sites and mock drafts, he's kind of like a fringe first rounder. Like his current line right now is 32.5. So right on the fringe of whether he goes in the first or not. I think there's been a lot of smoke on maybe the Raiders drafting him. Yeah. He could end up being either that like Will Levis. Hey, he went at 8 to 12. Oh, or he fell into the second. Like he could go either way there. I think if he falls like to the early second, he probably falls a little bit more into like the mid second of rookie drafts. And at that point, I think he would be a great pick because you have the opportunity, whether he's good or not, I don't really care if he's good or not. You have the opportunity that if when he does become the starter, you have the huge skyrocket value increase. Just like Will Levis. Whether Will Levis is good or not, he's going in like the 6th or 7th of startups right now. And we haven't seen much good. We saw some at the beginning, and it's been okay since, but like it's more just like speculation with him. It's not like he's a rusher. We're kind of just speculating that maybe he can boom. And I think that can happen with quarterback, and getting a quarterback like him in the mid-second is interesting to me. I think there's a lot to not like about him, but I think that there's a lot of people that are just like taking him off their draft boards. I don't know if that's what you're doing, but if I can get him with like a 205, 204, because other people are taking him off their draft boards, that's a bet I'm willing to take. Maybe I'm having to pass on Blake Corum. Who cares?
Yeah, no, I have not removed him from my draft board. Me thinking he's going to fall from where he's at right now, 112, is just solely because I think he's going to fall in real life.
Yeah.
If he is drafted late first or even early second, I'll react accordingly. So, like, one thing I've learned over the last few years, and I learned this kind of with Levis and guys before him, is I don't have too strong of opinions on any of these quarterbacks, and I'm willing to change my opinion pretty quickly. And I don't
love it.
I think it's kind of the hardest position to evaluate. Famously, like, teams get it wrong all the time. You got teams that have like immeasurable resources pour like millions and millions of dollars into evaluating these quarterbacks. They're not any better at it than like a writer for the
coin.
yeah. So like it. So to me, I'm just going to kind of react according to the draft capital with him and Bo Nix too. So like if they get drafted late first, early second, then I'm in line with you. Like if they are mid-second rookie picks, yeah, I'd like taking that shot. And the one guy that is currently the 308 is the one quarterback that I kind of like, Spencer Rattler. Just because he, like, if you look at his tape, a lot of it looks like kind of bad Jordan Love from this past year. Of course, I wasn't going to go a whole episode without mentioning Love, but like where the arm talent just pops off the page, but then like he's making terrible decisions, and sometimes he'll like overthrow a guy by 10 feet. But his arm talent and some of the way he moves around in the pocket, like I just look at him and I'm like, there's something there. Like you put him in the right team with the right coaches. Maybe he's the guy that sits a year or two. But he's the guy that I'm just interested in. Like, so I'm probably not going to be below market wherever his market finalizes. I'm going to be willing to take him like a few spots higher, whether he goes, round 2, round 3, round 4 in real life. He's just a guy that I'm kind of intrigued by. Like, to me, his physical tools are more intriguing than what Penix and Nix have, even though they're a little more polished.
All it takes is like getting inserted into the starting lineup, and boom, the value goes up. And the other thing is, worst case scenario. Well, not worst case scenario. I guess it could go worse, but a decent case scenario is he's just like a kind of a career type backup, and he's like every now and then again you get to use him. Like I like having backup QBs on my team. Especially ones that are pretty talented. So, like, if you have how many times last year did we start backup quarterbacks? Like, a lot. Like, if you had, like, Nick Mullins, who you probably got off the waiver wire, like, fine. Like, give me a backup. If with your mid-third round rookie pick, you get a backup quarterback, that's not a bad place to be, considering the fact that a lot of the guys that go in the third are just turning to dust here in, like, literally 12 months.
Yeah, last year, week 16 in the fantasy playoffs, I actually lost a $10 bet to my cousin Brian. He was facing his brother, cousin Pat, in the fantasy playoffs, and he was telling Pat to start Jake Browning over Pat Mahomes. And I thought he was just fucking with him. And he was like, I'll bet you $10 that Jake Browning outscores Pat Mahomes this week. And, Pat struggled fantasy-wise, and Browning did great. So, but I was like, fine, I'll take that fucking bet. And, like, Browning crushed him. It was like 20-11, or I forget what their final points were. But I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, so yeah, I mean, Jake Browning was just on a fucking heater for like 5 weeks to end the season. So that happens like all the time. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, those quarterbacks, I think that they're really good bets. I mean, they can turn to dust just like any of these other guys, but the value that they can exceed is pretty substantial. And like we talk about taking running backs just so we can build up our running back room so that we can use these guys when they get inserted into the lineup. It's the same concept at quarterback. So yeah, I'm good with, filling out my roster with 4, 5, 6 of these guys, like a Penix Jr., like a Spencer Rattler. I think that's a great one. I think people get take lock. And so like, oh, his AP is 308. And then he goes in like the second round of the NFL draft. And people are hesitating to pull him into the second of rookie drafts or into the mid-second just because they've not seen him in there this entire time. So I think that's a good call.
Yeah, I don't know if you've looked into this guy too much. The one guy I just don't really know what to do with, but 312 seems a little low right now is Jermaine Burton.
There he is. Yep, I was going to bring him up.
Yeah, like some of the off the field stuff really does concern me where like there's people that talk to NFL teams and talk to general managers that say like he's completely off some teams' draft boards because of the character concerns. But like then there's a lot of people that just look at some of his early breakout stuff and his high pedigree, going to Georgia, Alabama, etc. Some of his flashes on tape talk about he's like a first round talent, and he's just a head case. So I really don't know what to do with him, but I think he's the guy that could end up rising pretty good bit, like into that mid to late second of rookie drafts. If he goes,
he's not going to show up great in the analytics world of things, but I think he's just a guy that in like the late third or even the fourth round of a rookie draft, if you want to take a dart throw, if you've got to take some sort of dart, I think he's a decent one. I mean, if you think about his rookie or his freshman year at Georgia, he played with George Pickens. He went for 400 yards. It was in 10 games. Pickens went for 500 yards in 8 games. So, I mean, he played. I think that's decent. That was also the COVID year. So his sophomore year, he comes back and he outproduces Ladd McConkey in one less game. He outproduces Adonai Mitchell in one less game. Then he goes to Bama. And I think one thing that's kind of underrated when you think about guys when they transfer is the adjustment that it takes when you're transferring. Like you're not just learning a new system, but you're kind of integrating with new guys. You're having to beat out guys that have kind of already insulated themselves. And he did just that. He led them in receiving, outgained Ja'Cory Brooks, albeit by only 3 yards. But he and Ja'Cory Brooks were neck and neck. And I mean, it's Alabama. They've got some really good talent on the rest of that wide receiver room. Whether they're like high-end NFL talent, okay, probably not, because that's not been a great wide receiver room at Bama. But they're still better than like a lot of these other teams that came from like non-Power 5, where you're talking about guys like let's say Jacob Cowing, who dominated at the UTEP level. All right, well, I mean, Jermaine Burton goes to UTEP. Maybe he's dominating. So I think that's probably one. I think that's a good call of Jermaine Burton. He's not going to show up sexy in anything, but if you throw some context to everything, maybe he figures it all out, and that's a steal potential in like the third or fourth of a rookie draft. Now, I'm not going to take him like the second, but like if I can take a guy like that with some context in like the late third or fourth, I think that's a good one.
Yeah, another guy that I think is going to rise up a little bit because there's some smart people who really like this guy.
You're going to call another one for me.
Johnny Wilson.
There it is. Yeah, you're back to back.
Yeah, 402. I know our friends David Plout and Jacob Sanderson, who we've had on. They have both talked up this guy in our group chat. They just kind of like his underlying numbers. There's like Johnny Wilson has some like eye-popping stuff against like I think single man coverage where like he's like the class leader in yards per run or something like that. And David had made a big point of mentioning that he tests very similarly to Mike Evans, and he's only like 2 inches taller, I think. So He's kind of been beating the drum of this guy should not switch to tight end. This guy is a legit wide receiver prospect that I'm going to love taking in the third round of rookie drafts. The 6'7" thing kind of bothers me, and maybe it shouldn't, but like it's like, man, he does seem a little too tall to play wide receiver. Like, but that shouldn't necessarily be a limiting factor, especially if he's agile enough to, move as well as guys a few inches shorter than him. So I probably shouldn't care about it as much as I kind of do right now. But
there's nothing to really care about once you get into like that third, fourth round range. Now, like if he's getting pushed into the second because he goes to some team that people get excited about, he goes to let's say the Jags, and they're like, he's going to start with Trevor Lawrence, like it's going to be great. All right, well, I'm not going to take him in the second round, but 402, mid third, I mean, he on a per game basis, he outperformed Keon Coleman this past year, and people were talking about Keon Coleman in the early to mid second. So I mean, Johnny Wilson, I think that's a really good one. I was going to bring him up as well. I think that he's being really undervalued. Give me him over guys like Xavier Legette. I know you like Roman Wilson, but I'd rather have Johnny Wilson. Give me him over Devontae Walker, Brendan Rice. Like he's going after all of those guys. Give me Johnny Wilson because there's just a lot of upside there, and he might turn to dust. Very likely, he will turn to dust. But that's why he's going in like the late third, early fourth.
Yeah, and for anyone watching on YouTube, if you're looking at this list and you're looking for another sleeper wide receiver who is conspicuously absent, Todd and I were talking before the show started. Javon Baker is a guy that a lot of people like, and there's just some kind of issue where he's not on Sleeper or the Dynasty Data Lab ADP right now, but he should probably be in the top 48 rookies from people I've been talking to. Like he could end up going on day 2 of the real life draft. There's just people. There's some stuff with him, like some route running and some of his highlight plays that people are kind of excited for, but he's just another kind of third round dart throw. I don't think anything special necessarily, but
he's one where I would call this like the all context class. I don't know if it's because of COVID or if it's because of NIL, or I don't actually think it's neither. I think it's just this happens sometimes and people want to point to something, but sometimes it just sort of happens. This class kind of sucks after the top 3 from a analytics standpoint. I'm sure it's fine from like a film standpoint. From an analytics standpoint, it's not good. And when I say analytics, I'm talking about like yards per team pass attempt, yards per route run, things like that. And it's not very good after the top 3 or 4 guys. It's not like the worst ever, but it's just not good. But there's a lot of guys that have some weird context to them. Like if you put things together, you're like, oh, like, all right, if and when Jermaine Burton hits, we can say, oh, look, he was outperforming Pickens. He was the leader for their team, different things. Talk about Johnny Wilson. Oh, he outperformed Keon Coleman. You look at Javon Baker. Oh, he was at Bama. For some reason, it didn't work out. He went to UCF. He was awesome at UCF. There's guys like that you can like piece together and be like, okay, it made sense. I don't want to be making those bets, but in the 4th round of a rookie draft, I do want to make those bets. I'm perfectly fine with it because the investment is basically nothing to make an investment like that. You can like trade. This will happen in your drafts. It will happen in mine. You can trade back from like the 301 to the 303 or even like maybe move back to the 302 and add somebody's like late 4th. Someone will just give you a pick because they're like, I don't care about that pick later. There's a guy that I want. I think you're going to take him. Let me trade up one spot and you can just have my 4th round pick. And if there's not a guy that you really want, like do that. Take one of these guys as a dart throw and just see what happens.
Yeah, one of the things I like doing every year, but especially I like doing with this rookie class, is a single 3rd round pick is not very valuable. But if you can stack 5 or 6 of them in the same rookie draft, there's a good chance you're going to hit on a good player, like or 2 out of that. So like from the end of the season in like towards the end of December till now, basically these last few months, what I've been doing is like in one of our leagues, I traded Zach Moss for Tank Bigsby, the 306 and the 312. Like people look at 306 and 312 and they're like, yeah, that's not shit. Zach Moss could be an RB1 with the Bengals this year. And maybe that's true. And maybe I get 3 absolute zeros, and I gave up Zach Moss. Who gives a shit, really?
You
Like
might have just drafted Tank Dell, though.
yeah, exactly. And the same leagues. Another trade I made around the same time was traded Deontay Johnson for Khalil Shakir, 207 and 305. And like, so I just try and stack up like as many of those late seconds and third round picks as you can. And then, any single hit rate might be around like 10 to 12%. I'm not sure exactly what the numbers are.
Yeah. So I'll play devil's advocate to your theory, but at the same time, it's not really devil's advocate because I agree with you. But on the other side, like the hit rate, yeah, those like third round picks, you're probably going to see like maybe 2 out of each third round that might hit. Out of the fourth, you might see 1. But like you said, if you're getting 5 or 6 of them and you're getting them for dirt cheap, almost like throw-ins on the deal that was already fair that you probably would have done anyways, but you got like the 310, then yeah, you're just stacking up. You have 4 or 5 of them. You've got a pretty good chance of hitting 1 maybe. And like if you look at this past class might have like set the tone wrong for people moving forward because
chasing the next Puka.
There were so many guys in that third round that hit that people might have the wrong expectation, but there was probably 4 that hit last year. Normally I think it's probably closer to just maybe a couple, 1 or 2. But I think stacking several of them if it's not expensive, I think that's a good call. Last guy that I've really wanted, 2 guys that I'll hit on, and I don't really have anything in depth. But as you're looking at Jaheim Bell, he's basically to me like Jatavian Sanders, but he goes in like the 4th. So like, all right, if you had told me Jatavian Sanders was going in the 4th and Jaheim Bell was going in the 2nd, I'd be like, no, I don't want Jaheim Bell. Give me Jatavian Sanders. But like in the 4th, that's a decent one. I kind of dogged Jacob Cowing earlier, but I think that he's a decent one that he had really good numbers at UTEP, not as stellar at Arizona, but solid. That's kind of what happened to Jaden Reed last year. He was awesome at Western Michigan early on, went to Michigan State, was fine, okay. I think that we need to start recognizing that transferring is more difficult than it is on our NCAA 14 game because you have to integrate yourself. Transferring on a video game is just take your 90 overall from one school to another school and bada bang, bada boom, you're ready to go. So I think that's probably something that we need to consider. And I'm just rattling off names here. Malik Washington is probably in the same mold as Jacob Cowling. Malik Washington was incredible PFF grade, one of the top in the country this past year at wide receiver, really small guy out of Virginia. But
there's some people that really like Malik Washington. Last thing I'll mention, it's you were talking about like Wilson outperforming Keon Coleman, and you can keep that thread going. And Keon Coleman outproduced Jaden Reed despite being a year younger at Michigan State. And we saw Jaden Reed become a successful rookie, like where he obviously has a place in the league. You can question his upside, I guess, but so it's very interesting to kind of compare all these guys and look at the range of outcomes. But I don't have too much more on the rookies if you want to get to the trade segment before we close out.
So I have one trade that we can hit on. Rashee Rice has been a hot topic as we kind of look at everything that's going on off the field. I don't really have any interest in getting into all of that, but what I can say is I'll try to trade for Rashee Rice if he's being valued at the very end of the glob, like wide receiver 25-ish. So the trade that I made, aging team, trying to get a little bit younger. I traded away Tyreek Hill, Travis Etienne, and Jacoby Myers for Chris Olave, Rashee Rice, and Aaron Jones. So that was Tyreek Hill, Etienne, Myers for Olave, Rice, Aaron Jones.
It's pretty close. It's pretty fair. I like getting. I like the move where you were talking about. It's an aging contender. You're just trying to get a little bit younger.
Yeah, I still have Adams, Cup, Diggs.
Yep. Okay.
So it was a team that was just
all
really
30.
Old.
Yeah.
Trying to kind of pivot young. So my thought with Aaron Jones was I'm getting probably not quite the upside that ETN has, but maybe on a points per game basis, similar to ETN with Aaron Jones. And then going from Hill to Olave is obviously a dip, but from a value standpoint, it's pretty much a wash. I had tried originally to trade Hill for Olave straight up, and I couldn't get it done. Then I get Rice in the deal, but Rice and ETN from a value perspective are probably what I was looking at, which I probably would rather have ETN. So value wise, I'm not like over the moon, but I think this is one of those in like 12 months when now Tyreek Hill is in the value range of like Adams, Diggs, Cup, then I'm like, oh, glad I made that Olave deal.
Yeah, so it's just making a trade a year too early instead of a year too late type thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, at some point soon in the next year or two, Tyreek is definitely going to fall significantly behind Olave in value. Just whenever his production drops off a little bit from being like nuclear wide receiver 1 in redraft to like wide receiver 12, let's say, then you're going to see his dynasty value get hit disproportionately. So yeah, no, I think that's a good trade that makes sense. One of the only big trades I've made recently did not get a good reaction, man. People thought I got fucking killed in this trade. And I mentioned earlier that I had a lot of Caleb shares that I've been kind of shopping around, trying to get like a 104, 105 and like a future first. Have not been able to get that done anywhere. So in one of our leagues that I am rebuilding, needed extra picks, I traded Caleb for Brock Purdy and what I consider to be a mid 25 first and 25 third. I thought that was just kind of fine. Like I didn't think it was like a home run, but I thought it was fine. And everybody in that league was like, man, what the fuck was Matt thinking with this trade, etc. Like I didn't think it was that bad. I get Purdy is not like the sexiest fucking guy in the world, but like he was about 20 points per game, like mid to low end QB1 last year. He's gonna be in that same environment for a while, in my opinion. So I think he kind of gets undervalued a bit in these discussions. But you think I sold too low, like everyone else was saying?
I would rather have Caleb, but I think it's probably closer than people are giving it credit for, especially if it is a mid 25 first. I don't think 25 class is supposed to be like spectacular or anything. It's not like this class, but anytime you can get a mid first, the point per game difference between Caleb and Purdy is not going to be like drastic. Like if Purdy outperforms Caleb Williams this year, like I would be surprised. So first, I was really value of Caleb potentially jumping into that like top 5 that you're kind of missing out on. But all it takes is that 25% into a bid pick, hitting on it. And then Purdy just continuing to be kind of like who he's been, really. So like I don't have a big issue with it. I'd rather have Caleb Williams, but I don't think it was as drastic as the group chat had kind of berated you over.
Yeah. I was surprised by that reaction. I thought it would garner like very little reaction. Like, yeah, maybe I'd take Caleb, maybe I'd take the Brock side, but whatever, it seems fine. But
if it had been Purdy in the 107, I'm interested to see like what would have been the response.
Well, another thing that I thought was kind of interesting, because I remember when I was making those trade offers in that league, I was looking at Dynasty Data Lab, a tool that we reference quite often. And Brock Purdy was like around the 103, 104 range. I think he was like right after 104. And so I think if the trade was 104, 25 first and third, for Caleb, no one would say anything. Or I think that people would be like, okay, that seems about right. So to me, that tells me that maybe Brock Purdy is overvalued by ADP, but I think because I would rather have the 104 and probably 105 too over Brock, especially as a rebuilding team. But I think it's fair to value him around there, considering his age and production and team, etc. Like, yeah, if he was on the Panthers, he would suck maybe, but like he's not on the Panthers, so who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
Like, so
yeah, I'd say like the 106-ish. I'd rather have Purdy than Odunze. I'd rather have him more than JJ McCarthy, Bowers, I might take Bowers over Purdy, but it might be tight. Maybe I take Purdy over him. I think that one might be just like team dependent. They're probably same tier overall, but give me Drake May and Jaden Daniels over Purdy. But yeah, I don't think that's an egregious trade by any stretch, especially if you're trying to kind of bolster up some depth for a team. Sounds like it's the 101, so you probably are a rebuilder. So yeah, I don't have that much of an issue with it.
Well, yeah, that's that league me and you have both talked about where we tried to do a 1-year punt, didn't really execute as well as we had hoped, and might end up turning into a 2-year punt.
Yeah, and that's another one of my 102s.
Yeah, exactly. So before we get out of here, you did just bring up Brock Bowers, and it made me realize we went the entire rookie show without mentioning him. I don't think there's much to talk about. Like he's 106, kind of like what you said to me, like almost tier of his own. Like I'd have him over Odunze, but below the top 5 guys. I'm not worried about like Kyle Pitts fatigue and us getting burned on like these tight ends prior to this. Like I don't really care that much. I think he's a great prospect. I think he has a potential to smash like Laporta did as a rookie. And so I'm willing to take that bet at 106. I don't think there's a whole lot else to discuss unless you have like an interesting take on him.
No, I think the only way he really moves up above 106 is if he goes to like the Chargers, maybe.
Yeah.
Anywhere else. Yeah, anywhere else, I don't think he really moves up much, but there's no reason for him to move down as long as he doesn't fall outside of like the top 15 or so, and he goes to like a somewhat reasonable spot. I think there is the opportunity that like he goes somewhere where they already have like a tight end that we kind of thought was their tight end one, like let's say the Bears, like Cole Kmet, and you're like, whoa, that's a weird fit, like Bowers and Kmet, and then you could see maybe Bowers fall to like the 107 or 108 if like McCarthy got a smash spot. But I think you're right. I think he's probably kind of locked into that 106 range. I wouldn't see him very often going ahead of that, or anticipate him going ahead of that, though.
Yeah, the only other nice landing spot that I see him mocked to a little bit is the Bengals at 18.
Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah,
could be interesting. But if he falls to 18,
that landing spot makes up for it.
Yeah, exactly. So I still think he falls in line at like 106 or maybe 105 if May goes to the Patriots and people are grossed out by it. Maybe he falls to 106 in that specific draft, but won't be a draft I have a top 5 pick in, that's for sure. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it, though.
Yeah. Thanks for joining the Dynasty Market Watch presented by Bulletproof Family of Podcasts. Next week, NFL Draft. We'll be back after that. You can find us on Twitter. Matt is at Dynasty Peasant. I am Todd at Dynasty S Flex, and you can find me in the Bulletproof Discord. Would really appreciate a rating review of the podcast. Hope you can check it out on YouTube as well. Thanks for joining.
Imaginary players, they make coach right.